Hi, welcome to episode 11. In this episode, we are going to round up and finish the custom config file mini-series. And we're going to do that by adding two more tests, and these tests are going to cover the whole process of using custom config files from beginning to end. And we're going to use the code exactly in the way the code will be used in the final application. And they will expose a bug we still have in our custom config file configuration. So just to illustrate how important it is to add this kind of edge-to-edge test. Right, I hope you enjoyed. Let's get started. This is where we left off last time. We just had created our converter. The only other thing I did was I added the converter as a DI argument to the reader. Just these two lines to test that it will work as expected. And then I added that to the DI XML too, so that the converter here will be passed as an object into the reader, which made the test pass again. Right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to create an edge-to-edge test, a test that will use the reader classes exactly like they are going to be used in a real application. Sometimes I write this type of test first, sometimes I write it last, but it's so valuable, it's time well invested. Let's check everything is wired up with a test nothing test. And just recently saw a tweet from Matthias Veras calling this test, "Is this thing on?" That was kind of nice. And it fails. Very good. We're ready to go. So let's call this one test can access unit conversion config. We'll need the object manager. Get instance. Object manager create. So what do we want to create? Well, we'll need the config virtual type. And because it's too hard for me to remember, I'll copy that out of the configuration. I'll also copy this for type hinting. Object manager, create an instance of this. So hopefully it will apply all our DI configuration. Of course, PHP Storm doesn't know the virtual type, so I want to add a type in for the real one. I've come to really rely on the autocompletion and the warnings PHP Storm can supply if I get the typing wrong. Time to make an assertion about some conversion factor. So how about kilogram to pounds? That's a nice crooked conversion factor. So this is what we expect. Config get kilogram to lbs. Will it work? Let's run the test to see what happens. Well, look at that. Our code works. Writing a test that we know works, does it even make sense? Well, it's good to get confirmation that it works. Plus, we're not done yet. Let's try and merge multiple files. But how do we do that? The code is file name based, and we already have a unit conversion XML in our module. So do we have to create a second module? Well, we don't really know. To answer that, let's look into the file system reader class, how it loads and merges configuration files. I'll just copy the class name out of the DI XML. Right, so here in the file system reader, there is a method read. There's a file resolver, and if you pass it a file name, it returns a file list, which gets passed to read files. Read file takes the list and then iterates over it with the key and the content. What happens to content? It gets merged. I would guess that's the file content. So what about the key? The key is used here in an exception, invalid XML and file key. So we can assume that key is the file name and content is the file content. So let's go ahead and create a test double for this class, and then we can pretend to have multiple files. I want to keep this first test. Let's add a new one. Test multiple files can be merged. Okay, we definitely want to get the object manager. Oh, actually not quite yet. First let's create the mock file resolver equals this get mock. Oh, I copied the wrong class. What we actually need is the file resolver interface. Here it is. Copy reference and pass that into getMock. Mock file resolver method get will return, well, it's an array, and the key is a file name, and the content is XML. Before we simulate two files, let's get it working with one. Okay, we need some unit conversion XML. Let's take this unit here as an example. Conversion map. Right, and to ensure we're actually getting our test data and not the real stuff, let's change the values to some dummy data. Okay, so now we're ready to pass the file system resolver into the file system reader. So now we'll need the object manager. Reader is object manager create. And we want to create a reader, and we'll inject the mock into the reader. I need a brief look again what the name of the constructor argument was. It's file resolver. I could have guessed that. So we'll pass that in. File resolver is mock file resolver. Okay, this is getting kind of unreadable. Let's break that into several lines. Okay, this is better. Okay, so we are passing the mock file resolver to the reader, and now we pass the reader into our config object, and we already had that once up here. Let's extract this into a property, config type, and now we can copy this down here, except that this time we are going to pass in the reader. Time to add the assertion. Only this time we're asserting our dummy data. Config get kilograms to pounds. Look at that. Not expected. Cannot instantiate interface schema. Oh, I know. We're passing in the concrete file reader type, not our virtual type. So our schema locator configuration wasn't being applied. Okay, let's try again. Okay, we're still getting the real data, not our dummy data. And the reason for that is caching. If we look into the config data class, we can see it receives a cache instance. And in init data, it tries to load the cache. And if cache load returns false, it will call read on the reader, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so let's replace the cache with a test double. Mock cache equals this getMock. Cache interface and mock cache method load will return false. And then we'll also pass that in here, cache mock cache. Now caching should be disabled for this instance. Let's run the test again. Okay, seems like our mocks are working. Good. So now let's go ahead and expand this so it simulates a second file. And this time we're going to, well, let's just override one of them and set it to 444. And that's our new expected value. If that gets merged, then kilograms to pounds should be 444. Let's see if this works. Oh, look at that, it doesn't. More than one node matching query conversion map unit conversion. And the reason is it doesn't know how to merge our XML. It needs to know which attributes on the XML nodes serve as unique identifiers. So for example, every time the merger encounters a unit node, if the ID attribute is the same, it should override the values. Otherwise, it's a new unit. The good thing is we can fix that through the IXML, because in the file system reader, It receives the ID attributes array, and we can use that to specify how nodes should be merged. We already have a test in the red state that will be turned green by adding this configuration, so I'll not bother adding an extra test for this DI config. Right, new argument for the reader. Argument name is ID attributes and the type is array. And we'll add an item with the name conversion map unit conversion. That's the array key, and the value type is a string. And for this node, the ID attribute is 2. And then we also need to specify the ID attribute for our other node, which is conversion map unit. I have to go ahead and clear the test sandbox cache there because I have test cleanup disabled. And let's run the test again. Perfect. And we're green. And with this, I believe we have a fully working solution for a custom config XML file type. Specifying the ID attributes for the merge process is necessary, otherwise whoever tries to extend our XML config would be in for a surprise. Now, with the tests we wrote today in place, I think it would be safe to delete all the other DI arguments config tests that we created earlier, because as long as these tests work, we don't care about the details of the DI arguments, right? So they too became just stair-step tests that are safe to delete once other code is in place. And the final step, as always, get rid of the code that we've written so we can do the kata again. Please let me know what other topics you would like to have covered. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Until next time.